Renee over at Cycles and Spots, a prolific Reaktor developer, has recently released a really interesting new device called WaveMod. Lots of hidden depths in this thing, and that's what I'm proposing to cover in this deep dive. And the reason I'm calling it deep dive is that there's already quite a good video from Renee himself describing the general functionality of the device and giving a lot of preset demos. So I'm not going to rehash any of that material. There's three areas that I want to expand on in this video. The first is a few features of the general interface that weren't mentioned by Renee. The second is adding some features from Reaktor that help automate it in interesting ways. And mainly, I want to explore bringing in new samples and new maps and how to deal with those. But the main reason, the overall reason, is that it became very quickly clear to me when I opened it up that it's basically an elaboration upon one of my all-time favorite Reaktor devices called NanoWave, which is a wave scanner. Maybe wavetable is a reasonable name for it. Renee calls WaveMod, as you can see, a wavetable synth. So that's part of what I wanted to explore, the ways in which this improves on or just simply adds features to the basic technology that I've loved for so many years in NanoWave. So here's a NanoWave and WaveMod together in the same window. And you can see right away that there's some obvious similarities. We've got two sample windows, waveform displays, each one showing a slider underneath it, and the slider moves a little scanning indicator. We've got two sample maps in each case, both with the same samples in them. And we can shift between the samples. In NanoWave, it's very easy. You just grab the number. In WaveMod, you have to drop down this menu and choose between 100 labeled samples. There's only 43 samples in NanoWave. A lot of the same effects and so forth. The main difference is you don't need the clock running in Reaktor to use NanoWave. Whether the clock is running or not, the scanning movement, everything that happens in NanoWave, happens only when you press a key. And the gate that you provide that way triggers all this, the setup in these matrices of combined modulation effects. But if you turn on the clock, nothing changes. But you notice right away that things start moving down here in WaveMod. That's because all the movement, all the modulation in WaveMod comes from these two step sequencers. Actually, there's 8 of them. Each sample has 4 separate sequencers. Each one can be set to a different rate and different amount, and they handle a wide range of different modulations, far greater than NanoWave offers. But so let's listen to the difference if we turn NanoWave off and listen to WaveMod. Just holding down one key, you get all these different modulations. Turn off the clock, and you can still play it, but there's no modulation of anything. And the scanners don't move at all. So if you go into a synth, for instance, they play perfectly well, sound great, but you have to turn the clock on to really see what they're about. Another difference is that NanoWave has a third oscillator here. There's a sine oscillator providing a basic tone. And it's kind of a backup pitch idea that WaveMod doesn't have and doesn't need. So the other difference between the two devices, here's the sample maps for WaveMod, the sampler 1 and 2, and for NanoWave. So NanoWave, they are all set to loop, and the looping length is 256. But if you look at WaveMod, the waveforms are also all set to loop, but the sample length, the loop length is 2048. So right off the bat, you can see that the samples that come with WaveMod are much bigger, longer, and the loop length is much longer too. Plus, there's 100 of them as opposed to 43. The way I would sum up WaveMod in terms of what it provides is two things. It's a modern rethink of the nanowave idea with lots of additional features and benefits just from the interface, and the modulation being the main one. But also, it provides a completely different sort of sample map for that engine. And so we're going to go into that in most depth when we switch over to WaveMod itself. So let's do that. So here's a couple of things about the user interface before we get into the sample set. As you can see what's going on here, we've got wavetable position in both cases, and in this one also volume, controlling this one. Note that the volume is completely turned off on this to get the maximum result, maximum difference between on and off. That's the position you want to be in for anything you're modulating. If you turn it up, you'll hear a little bit of difference, but it's not starting from zero. But in addition, there's some modulation built into the filter section here. And the way to access it is to turn down the envelope. Simply by turning down the envelope, notice that the LFO, which if it's got any value at all, plus some little amplitude there, you can fade it out by going back to the envelope. I haven't really noticed anything from the envelope itself. So here's a snap in which I pre-set up the LFO. And the other thing that I don't think is sufficiently clear from Renee's demo is how really great this tone shaper series of controls is. There's all kinds of ways you can massage the final output. Important thing to notice is that when you change to a different sample in the map, nothing happens until a key press. So, for instance, if you're listening to something and you make the switch, nothing happens again until you re-trigger, which is an interesting difference between this and NanoWave, which allows you to modulate the sample independently of any kind of gate. So, an interesting workaround is a node sequencer and a modulation sequencer. Node sequencer creates gate events which will trigger sample selection events chosen by this step sequencer. So this is set to the left sample thing here. So if I turn this on and set it up to go rather quickly, and then switch this to so if I slowed this way down, of course, it would only happen once this is switched to a different sample. So you get, again, basically microscopic control of any kind of modulation, unlike you would with nanowave. And you can turn it on for the other device, set at a different rate. And here's another interesting application of that. If I set both of these to 1 and to a rapid change, I can scroll through the sample map using this control, which I said earlier, you can't do up here you can't scroll through this list. This gives you an opportunity to do that. You just have to re-trigger every time. And of course you can set them both up, send to WaveMod, and go down here to list. There we go. And of course there's 2 of them. So now we turn these off. We're of course setting them both to the same sample. And notice that it's sluggish to do that because I haven't set the speed here high enough so that So here's an experiment I set up with obviously 2 versions of nanowave and an automated mixer that crossfades between them so that I can compare the sounds of nanowave with its original map. I'll turn this on. We've got 4 maps here, but the second pair has been replaced just using sample map import replace with the sample map saved from WaveMod. They're basically identical except for the different sample map. Because there's 100 entries in this WaveMod sample map, I had to change the range here from the 43, 42 that it is here to 100 over here. That's the only change. So there's a couple of interesting things to note first. Because these are basically the same instrument, changing the controls on one side changes them on both sides. So I can scroll through the different waves in the normal way on either of these interfaces, and they both will change. The selection over here will be scaled differently than over here because, of course, the difference between 42 and 100. But the same thing goes with selecting snaps. If I select a snap with either of these selected, both will change. And if you notice, the position of the control is identical, even if the name hasn't changed. So basically, I'm just going to demonstrate how, without any other change, the sample map from WaveMod works in a fascinating way when simply placed inside the original nanowave. So I'll just be holding 1 or 2 keys. And this, of course, is the WaveMod sound, and this is the original nanowave sound. foreshadowing here, but clearly there are differences in the tones you can get from the different maps, and new maps for nanowave have generally been hard to come by. With WaveMod, basically you've tripled the number of tones you can get out of the original nanowave. The nanowave map didn't work very well in WaveMod, but if you combine it with the original WaveMod map, it can be quite interesting. So here's a setup in which, using the precision of WaveMod's modulators, I've got the volume on each side switching back and forth. So over here, for instance, this side is silent when the black bars are here and active when they're in here, and vice versa. And I've set up both sides to automate on a gate. So I'll step through it and you can hear the difference. Okay, here I'll switch over to some presets. The key things so far with the two maps that we've been looking at, the original nanowave one and the new WaveMod one, every one of the wave files, when looked at individually, it's got loop checked and has a looped length. So any new maps that we wanted to make for WaveMod or nanowave would presumably also have to be looped in this way, and it's not that challenging to do. It can't be done, as far as I know, in batches or in bulk. You simply select each one at a time in waveform mode and make sure that looping is turned on, and then you set a loop length. This map that I'm showing here right now is one that's made up entirely of Serum wavetable. These are a batch of free ones from a website called Cymatics, which has tons of them. Of course, there are tons available everywhere. And the advantage of them is that they're not just wave files. They're all recorded at a certain, initially at a certain frequency that makes it easy to pitch them once they're put inside a wavetable. Here's the first wave file that I've dragged in here. It was called Autobot. And as you can see, I've set up for the wavetable position to go straight from one end to the other. And you can hear that it's kind of steppy. Let's look at it in Serum. Sounds pretty similar, but as you can see here, I'm using a stepped LFO. And now play it. Same sound, but much smoother. So WaveMod is actually playing Serum wavetables. Not quite as smooth or as refined as Serum, but it's only $20 instead of $200. Pretty cool, basically.